Victoria has many diverse habitats rich with bird life. We're heading east from Adelaide along the coast to explore some of these. Bull Lagoon is one of the largest and most diverse freshwater lagoon systems in southern Australia. This seasonal wetland is home to a wide range of wildlife and provides essential drought refuge for many rare and endangered bird species. Magpie geese are regular and noisy visitors. Sometimes this refuge dries out, but at present there is enough water to attract large flocks of whiskered tern, showing the dark grey underparts of breeding plumage. We've crossed the border into Victoria, where we're staying at Nelson, near Simpson's Landing on the Glenelg River. It's a beautiful spot, and the flowering bottlebrush are very attractive to honeyeaters. There's also plenty of seed and insects around for the parrots, finches and fairy wrens. Fascinating recent studies have shown that 76% of all offspring of superb fairy wrens are sired by males other than the female's social mate, and it's the female who does the early morning philandering. Our first robin of the trip, what an obligingly still bird family. That was quick. Rufous Bristlebird. A ground-dwelling bird that runs with surprising speed and dexterity considering its large tail through the thickest undergrowth and skulks among shrubs and bushes. Established pairs occupy small territories and, despite advertising this with year-round singing, they can be frustratingly difficult to see. But it's early morning, prime feeding time, and this pair is fully absorbed and giving delightful views. Maybe they're feeding young. It's great to watch them for once, interacting in the open. We're heading to Simpson's Landing on the Glenelg River, once we have a clear road. This Nankeen night heron is getting tired of waiting for a boat to pull in and give it an easy meal. Besides, it's the middle of the night for a nocturnal bird. Back to bed. Musk duck, one of the stiff-tailed diving ducks. They're almost completely aquatic and pretty helpless on land. Now, from above, the unmistakable screech of yellow-tailed black cockatoo. There are plenty of pine plantations in this area for them to feed on the cones. Farther along, we're excited to hear the rusty croaks and noisy cracking of seeds from another cockatoo, Gang cockatoo, females with grey heads and males with spectacular bright red heads and crests. Their attention is firmly on the eucalypt seeds, making them very confiding and fascinating to watch as they split open those hard shells. Just back over the border, in the farthest southeast corner of South Australia, is Piccaninnie Ponds, a Ramsar-listed wetlands. It's a marvellous area of coastal fen fed by groundwater springs, and its unique habitat attracts many birds. Pick Swamp is a wonderful conservation story that is part of this wetland. Magpie, geese, brolgas, egrets and waterfowl of every sort gather here. Australasian Bittern, one of the world's most endangered water birds, breeds here in the dense reeds. This mysterious bird is hard to see in this environment. If they're frightened, they stand up absolutely straight and hold still, and the streaking on the neck looks just like reeds. However, years ago, before they became quite so scarce, we had an amazing sighting at Larratinga Wetlands in the Adelaide Hills. A bittern landed on the path in front of us, checked us out, and then strolled leisurely into the shallow water. Usually so elusive, it stands a metre tall and is hard to miss at this distance. It was a rare opportunity to watch its stealthy stalking and feeding techniques. Back in Nelson on our present trip, we're visiting the Glenelg River Estuary, where hundreds of swans, ducks and coots gather. A raptor has flown over and put them up. It's easily identified as swamp harrier by its white rump. A small group of migratory waders, bar-tailed godwits. We're leaving Nelson and heading east, but the distance of this trip precludes Portland, which we had visited in 2016 to see the only mainland breeding colony of Australasian Gannets at Danger Point. 2 kilometres out to sea, Lawrence Rocks hosts a breeding colony of 6,000 pairs, but the smaller Danger Point colony of 300 pairs means we can observe these magnificent pelagic birds up close on land. Even closer when Brian, one of the volunteers, lets us go inside the fox-proof fence to the edge of the roped-off colony, where we can experience the full blast of incessant bird noise, the smell of fish and guano, and the sheer busyness of the birds' lives. They can live for up to 30 years and pair for life, and there is noisy celebration when a partner comes in. Lots of affectionate neck twining, bonding, and more. Kelp gulls hover, hoping to snatch an egg or chick. And there are 3 pairs of South African Cape gannets somewhere in here. Found. Note the longer, thin black throat stripe compared to our native gannet. Without Brian, we wouldn't have had a hope of picking this out. Gannets can dive from a height of 30 metres, achieving speeds of 100 kilometres per hour as they hit the water, folding their wings just before impact to create a spear that can reach 20 metres underwater, metres deeper than other airborne birds. Out to sea, the much smaller, dark pelagic birds flying past are most likely fluttering shearwaters. At a nearby area of reforested wetland put aside for conservation by Alcoa, we were lucky enough to see a flock of one of our favourite birds, the constantly chattering, stubby and busy little varied sutella. This is a female of the black-capped southern race. Crested shrike-tits are also arboreal foragers in the higher branches. Their beaks are far more powerful than the sutellas, and they tend to travel in pairs. Searching for blue-winged parrots, we took a quick detour to the southern Grampians and stopped by the side of the road to watch this iconic Australian marsupial clambering about, astonished to see it so awake, let alone so active, as they're nocturnal and can sleep up to 20 hours a day, so that we usually see them as a furry stationary ball curled up high in the fork of a eucalypt. They don't have much energy to spare either, as they feed only on the succulent new tips of eucalypt leaves, and must eat at least half a kilo of this low-nutrient diet each night, of which 75% is expelled as waste. Like many of the birds around them, habitat loss has led to them becoming endangered. Bird found, and thank goodness it's perching. Blue-winged parrots are ground feeders but are almost impossible to see when feeding, and they'll fly up at the least disturbance. Back to our present trip along the coast to Anglesea, where it's very cold and windy. The raven is having trouble holding on while it asserts its territory. However, this small, elegant raptor is striding the wind with no difficulty. The sedentary striated fieldwren is found in swampy heaths around the southeast coast. It's popped up in these conditions just long enough to check us out before retreating to its usual, more sheltered ground habitat. A male scarlet robin is a bright spot of colour in this open, scrubby eucalypt forest. And this is our much more usual glimpse of the notoriously skulking, ever-singing bristlebird. A puddle by some roadworks makes a convenient bathing spot for a flock of silver eyes, a widespread species with different races adapted to various habitats. It's also attracted Australia's common seagull, silver gull, and welcome swallows, collecting mud for nest building. Exploring the ironbark forest just behind the beach, we see possibly Australia's loudest bird, the intelligent, entertaining and long-lived sulphur-crested cockatoo, whose harsh cries and deafening clamour startled and terrified the first white settlers in Australia. Behind this part of the coast are the magnificent Otway Ranges, where we're now heading. For South Australians, the height of these grand trees is amazing, as is the diversity of plant and animal life in this high rainfall environment. Here's the yellow robin again as we start on the circuit track. Brown thornbills are tiny foragers among shrubberies up to 5 metres high. They rarely come to the ground and range across much of southern Australia. Striated thornbills are completely arboreal and feed much higher in eucalypts. Larger and more conspicuous, yellow-faced honeyeater is also an active arboreal forager, but with a loud, ringing call. Adding to the forest soundscape are the clear, piping tones of the colourful crimson rosellas. Back in the picnic grounds, a male Satin Bowerbird keeps flying across. It must have a bower near, but it's well hidden. Leaving Anglesea, we're skirting around Melbourne to stay at Healesville. From there, we head to the hills to explore Toolangi State Forest. This is another lush rainforest habitat. As we come to the damp, leafy tracks, we see the distinctive stop-start foraging of Bassian thrush. This looks like a meal for the family. Myrtle beech used to dominate these cool temperate rainforests, but they're very susceptible to fire, and this tree is one of the oldest survivors. Its drab colouring and shy nature make olive whistler one of the most difficult to spot of this often more confiding family. It hides away in cool, wet, dense undergrowth, and so we're very pleased to glimpse this bird. It's lunchtime, so we're driving to a picnic area, Tanglefoot, that gives more open views of the forest periphery. And sure enough, there's our iconic Australian bird, Laughing Kookaburra, perched in an excellent open position for spotting prey. And flitting about below, perching on the fence posts, which also make good vantage points, is a pair of flame robins, the male resplendent with its brilliant orange-red chest and belly contrasting with smoky dark grey upper parts. The female is far more subdued russet brown on top, with light brown underparts. An entertaining place to eat lunch. We've eaten but can't resist another picnic area because it has a lyrebird track. The walk is beautiful, but no lyrebird this time. However, the ever-obliging grey shrike thrush is happy to feed near us, as is this dazzling male Australian king parrot in the magnificent full adult plumage attained at 2.5 years old. Got to be happy with that. Heading back to the coast, we're calling in at Yellingbo Conservation Park in the hope of seeing helmeted honeyeater, an endangered subspecies of yellow-tufted honeyeater. Unfortunately, this is the nearest we get to seeing one. At least this gives us time to explore Bunyip Conservation Park, and the weather has warmed up considerably. A pair of rufous whistlers, which seem to follow us along the track, are more typical of the confiding and inquisitive nature of whistlers. We're driving slowly to Sandy Bay, behind the classic, unpredictable behaviour of other road users. Sadly, there is a lot of roadkill here, but it's mainly the poor nocturnal wombats. A beautiful stretch of coastal conservation park. There are 6 species of rosella, and the crimson rosella itself has 3 distinct subspecies. This far east it's the elegans subspecies, hard to miss with its brilliant crimson and blue plumage. Red wattlebird is another large, easily seen and noisy species. Grey shrike thrush is far more musical. And so is grey butcherbird, but this bird wasn't going to oblige. Back on the beach, we're delighted to see a hooded plover family twinkling along the sand. These tiny beach breeders are endangered. Their nests are easily destroyed and feeding disturbed by people, dogs and vehicles. However, an active and successful rehabilitation effort is underway along Australia's southeast coast. We're at a nearby wetland reserve. And here's a striated pardalote which has found a hollow branch forming a tunnel in which it's built its nest. Striated is the largest, most widespread and nomadic of the pardalotes. We're staying at Sandy Point, and next morning we're at Tura Bird Hide with a large group of pied oyster catchers. This is the southernmost point of mangrove habitat in Australia. There are close views too of critically endangered eastern curlew which have arrived from Russia or China. We've driven quickly to Shallow Inlet while the tide is out to look for more migratory waders, but despite perfect habitat and a beautiful still day, the birds prefer elsewhere, so it's back to Tura to see what a change of tide has brought. The curlew are still around, but farther out, and so are the other waders, much farther out, so that our best guess is plenty of bar-tailed godwits. We were too slow, time and tide, etc. A sudden change of weather, and someone is enjoying it. Well, that's what makes these magnificent lush green rainforests, and now the sun has appeared. Off we go around the tracks, and when we come to leaf litter, there is Bassian thrush, characteristically stabbing, then jerking up for a quick look round. We're statues. Then a golden birding moment, sudden and unexpected, as are so many of the best birding experiences. We're right above a pair of pilot birds, a species we've seen only once before and never filmed satisfactorily. Their natural habitat is gullies in temperate wet sclerophyll and rainforests. They're very poor flyers, and most of their time is spent on the ground, foraging through the moist undergrowth. Their name comes from their supposed habit of following lyrebirds, taking prey that they flush, and also from their call in the olden days guiding bushmen seeking for lyrebirds. And sure enough, that powerful resonant series of different bird calls can only be a superb lyrebird, one of the two endemic lyrebird species. These large, charismatic, mainly terrestrial birds are wary though, and this male steps in front of us just long enough to catch a glimpse of its imposing tail, from which its name derives. And this wasn't even called the Lyrebird Trail. Back in the picnic area, grey butcherbird again. And of course, crimson rosella feeding on the lawn. Its startlingly deep, brilliant colouring certainly contrasts with the lighter coloured, more orange subspecies we see in Adelaide, Adelaide rosella. We're heading farther east to spend the night at Bairnsdale so that we can have an early start to call in at Fairy Dell on our way to Marlo. Fog is slowing us, but not as much as the hopelessly wrong Google map. Finally arriving, and it's glorious, sunny and still, and this really is a magic spot. Near the bridge is Sacred Kingfisher, smallest and commonest of the Australian kingfishers. It's partly migratory and comes south from September to breed in southern Australia. And another summer migrant, black-faced monarch. This beautiful valley is alive with birdsong, and we've picked out the thin silvery call of Rufous fantail, yet another summer migrant, a delicately moving and very pretty flycatcher. Back in the cleared parking area, the rough-barked hollow tree is an attractive feeding spot for red-browed tree creeper. A family group of white-winged choughs is feeding on the ground, watched from above by collared sparrowhawk. What resilience this valley has displayed in recovering from the disastrous recent bushfires. Back on the way to Marlo and travelling beside a beautiful old railway bridge built on the floodplains of the Snowy River, and we've arrived at the river mouth itself, where there are a few migratory waders. In the dry eucalypt forest with rob clay, we're scanning she-oaks for glossy black cockatoo, and spot a powerful lace monitor, but the cockies are elusive. That night, in heathland habitat, we're thrilled to spot our first live wombat, closest living relative to the koala. We've seen so many as roadkill. Sadly, their main form of defence is to turn their formidably hard butt to the threat and stay stationary, very effective at the mouth of their burrow, but fatal on the road at night. At last, we're heading to Mallacoota, our farthest easterly point, with a few stops along the way. It's very hot, and this area has had a very dry winter, plus it's still recovering from the devastating bushfires of 2019-2020. Even so, there are some interesting birds around. At Drummer Forest, we're taking the track along the creek. Greg spotted something. Rose robin. These are also migratory breeders, and pairs will move northwards in autumn. The most arboreal of the robins, we're thrilled to have such a good view, which we might have missed except for the conspicuous rose-red breast patch of the male. The unmistakable machine gun rattle of Lewin's honeyeater, the most widespread honeyeater of Australia's eastern coastal rainforests. Driving now to our farthest easterly destination. The damage of the disastrous black summer bushfires is still very obvious. The scale of the damage was unprecedented, with 33 people dead, an estimated billion animals lost and 12 million hectares of Croajingolong National Park destroyed. It's heartening to come across an almost untouched area such as Gypsy Point and to see how the burnt areas are regenerating. Arriving at Mallacoota, it's great to at last take in the views over the Tasman Sea opening to the South Pacific Ocean, and to see this area so recently devastated by fire, recovering and thriving. Eastern Whipbird is presenting uncommonly clear views. We've heard their resounding antiphonal call, the female answering the long whip crack of the male, on untold numbers of rainforest walks along the eastern seaboard, but they're usually skulking and elusive. Small birds are enjoying this bath because there's not much water lying about after the dry winter, and it offers some protection. Although above there is no danger from this sleepy fellow. As its name suggests, common bronzewing is the most widespread of the 3 bronzewing species and occurs in diverse habitats all over Australia. And here again is Australia's most familiar finch, found right along our eastern seaboard, usually in small flocks. Taking the trail beside the ocean to watch the evening gathering of wildlife on open ground. Plenty of kangaroos feeding and birds flying in from the forest periphery. This open space near a eucalypt forest with a shrubby understory is a good spot to see Wonga pigeon, a plump bird which spends nearly all its time walking on the ground, rarely flying except to roost at night. It's wary, so it's difficult to approach in the forest itself. Not such a peaceful scene at the caravan park, where birds have become habituated to feeding from humans, leading to a fierce altercation between a red wattlebird and a female Satin Bowerbird. The bowerbird is left holding the ground, after which she flies up to a perch in a nearby tree at the edge of the surrounding forest, in proximity to a calling male. Blue is the preferred decorative colour of this species, and males prefer to build their bowers along the edges of differing habitats, so some careful searching finds a glint of blue and a rather scrappy bower, which may be a communal bower used for practice by young birds. White-throated tree creeper is a solitary acrobatic bird of southeast forests, doing its tree creeper thing of ascending while sidling around the tree. It took us a while to ID this honeyeater as scarlet honeyeater, smallest of the very large honeyeater family. This is pretty far south on the range for this nomadic eastern coast species, and it would have been much simpler if it had been a male with its scarlet chest and throat. Looking up, it's easy to see one of the most secretive and cautious of the rainforest pigeons, White-headed Pigeon, as it perches obligingly in the introduced laurel tree, and then on the introduced electricity wire. Also enjoying the park-like surroundings is a ground bird, a juvenile superb lyrebird, lacking the decorative feathers of the adults, but with the same long, powerful legs for raking the forest floor, searching for food. With over 3,000 kilometres on the clock, we're heading home via the shorter inland route. Our last stop is in Nil, a town in the Western Wimmera, halfway between Melbourne and Adelaide. It's dry now, but in flood years this boardwalk covers a floodplain, and even now there is plenty of breeding bird life, thanks to the adjacent lake. Cockatoos and parrots predominate. In the caravan park, a gregarious family group of white-winged choughs is chattering and feeding, but something is disturbing them. The red eyes of the adults bulge in alarm. It's swooping magpies. Just a bit farther west on the highway, the town of Geneva has constructed a small wetland, an oasis in the vast farming belt of the Wimmera, which has attracted a surprising variety of birds, even a tiny spotted crake. It's amazing how these solitary water birds turn up in the middle of such extensive dry areas. The blooming eucalypts are attractive to acrobatic lorikeets too. Even a bird of the open field, Rufous songlark, is seeking shelter here. The sparrowhawk knows there's prey around and good shelter in the dense she-oaks. A 5-star stop for birders on the long drive home.